The world has grown accustomed to the noise, the flashy headlines, and the carefully curated statements. But in the quiet corridors of 2026, a different kind of sound is emerging, the sound of a prince who has finally run out of things to hide. This isn't the defensive Harry we saw in years past. This is a man speaking from a place of cold, hard clarity. For a long time, the narrative was a duet. Every word was synchronized, every glance was choreographed, and every grievance was shared. But as the dust settles on their Californian dream, the harmony has faded. What's left is a solo performance that no one, not even those closest to him, saw coming. He sits before the camera now, not as a victim of a system or a rebel with a cause, but as a witness to his own life. There is a specific stillness in his posture. The fidgeting is gone. The nervous glances towards someone off camera have vanished. He is, for perhaps the first time in a decade, entirely alone in his thoughts. I realized, he begins, his voice dropping an octave, that I had become a reactor. I wasn't living a life. I was responding to a script that I didn't even write. It is a chilling admission. It suggests that the rebellion he thought was his own was actually just another cage, built with different bars. The analysis of this shift is vital. Experts in linguistics note that his use of the word we has almost entirely disappeared. In its place is a stark, sometimes brutal I. This isn't just a change in vocabulary. It's a psychological divorce from the collective identity that defined the Sussex brand. Look closely at his eyes in these recent frames. There is no longer the fire of anger that fueled his memoir. Instead, there is a profound sense of exhaustion, the kind that comes from realizing the mountain you've been climbing was actually a treadmill. He has stopped running, and in doing so, he has forced everyone else to stop too. The palace, meanwhile, remains a silent monolith in the background. But even within those ancient walls, the shift is being felt. The strategy has changed from containment to observation. They are watching a man disassemble his own myth piece by piece, without them having to lift a finger. He speaks about the silence not as a weapon used against him, but as a sanctuary he failed to appreciate. I thought the noise was the truth, he says, staring directly into the lens. I thought if I shouted loud enough, the echoes would eventually form a reality I could live in. I was wrong. This is the moment the Sussex narrative fractured beyond repair. Wasn't a single event or a public argument. It was the slow, steady realization that his personal history was being used as currency in a game, where he was the only one losing value. The setting of this new chapter is telling. Gone are the lush, green backdrops of staged interviews. He chooses gray tones, minimalist spaces, and natural light that doesn't hide the lines of age or the shadows under his eyes. He is no longer interested in looking like a prince. He is interested in looking like a man. Critics argue that this is just another layer of performance, a new authentic persona designed to garner sympathy. But there is a lack of polish here that defies the usual PR machinery. He stumbles over words, he leaves long, uncomfortable silences. He isn't selling a story. He's purging one. He reflects on the concept of home. For years, home was a place he was fleeing from. Then it was a place he was trying to build in a foreign land. Now, as he speaks, home seems to be a concept he has discarded entirely. He is a man in transit, emotionally and spiritually. I don't need you to believe me, he says, a slight, weary smile touching his lips. That was my mistake before. I was desperate for your belief. Now? I just need to hear myself say the words out loud without them being edited for maximum impact. The impact, however, is massive. By removing the theatricality, he has made himself more relatable and more dangerous to the institutions he left behind. A man who wants nothing is much harder to control than a man who wants justice. There is a specific mention of his mother, but it's different this time. He doesn't use her as a shield or a justification for his actions. He speaks of her as a human being who faced a similar isolation, finally understanding that her tragedy wasn't a roadmap but a warning. The camera lingers on his hands. They're steady. In previous years, he would twist his ring or pick at his cuticles. Now they rest flat on his knees. This physical grounding mirrors the mental state he is projecting, a man who has finally touched the bottom and found it to be solid ground. He addresses the rift, not with bitterness, but with a clinical detachment. Distances grow, he notes. Simply, sometimes you don't even notice the gap until you try to reach across and realize your arm isn't long enough. And eventually you just stop reaching. This isn't just about a family feud. It's about the deconstruction of an idol. The prince is being stripped away, revealing the Harry underneath a person who is deeply flawed, remarkably tired, and unexpectedly honest. The 2026 version of this story isn't about winning or losing. It's about the cost of the battle. As he concludes this segment of his reflection, the screen fades not to a logo or a call to action, but to a simple, lingering shot of the horizon. The message is clear. The era of the Sussex PR blitz is over. The era of the individual has begun. And in this new landscape, the only person Harry is trying to convince is himself. The reaction to his newfound solitude was not the explosion of sympathy he might have once expected. Instead, the world met his honesty with a heavy, contemplative silence. The digital landscape, usually a battlefield of hashtags and vitriol, seemed to pause. For the first time, the public wasn't looking at a celebrity. They were looking at a mirror of their own disillusionment. Behind the scenes, the machinery of the monarchy remained predictably silent, but the air within the palace had shifted. No longer were there frantic meetings on how to rebut his claims. The strategy had evolved into a form of clinical observation. They weren't fighting him anymore because, in his isolation, he was no longer a threat to the crown, he was a tragedy of his own making. High-level courtiers began to whisper about the Harry problem in past tense. The narrative had shifted from a war of the royals to a study of a stray. This subtle change in language within the UK press was the most damaging blow of all. To be hated is to be relevant. To be pitied is to be diminished. Back in California, the contrast was stark. The sprawling estate, once a symbol of liberation and making it on their own terms, now looked like a gilded fortress. Sources close to the couple hinted that the silence between the walls was louder than the noise outside. The joint brand, once valued in the hundreds of millions, was hemorrhaging its most valuable currency. Mystery. Harry began to spend more time in the rugged landscapes of Northern California. Away from the manicured lawns of Montecito, he was seen hiking alone, unbothered by the paparazzi who had once been his greatest shadow. It seemed that even the photographers had lost interest in a man who had stopped running. If there is no chase, there is no story. In a rare, unscripted moment, caught on a grainy cell phone video, Harry was seen at a small roadside diner. He wasn't surrounded by security. He wasn't wearing a designer suit. He looked like any other man nearing middle age, carrying the weight of a decade's worth of decisions on his shoulders. The prince had effectively vanished. Social media analysts noted a fascinating trend. The Meghan mentions and Harry mentions began to decouple. For years, they were a linguistic unit, Harry and Meghan, the Sussexes, the duo. Now, the algorithms showed two distinct entities drifting in opposite directions. The gravity that held them together was failing. In London, Prince William's approach took on a new steel-like resolve. He stopped entertaining questions about his brother entirely. At a charity gala, a reporter's mention of Harry's recent honesty was met with a polite, vacant smile and a swift pivot to the next topic. The door wasn't just closed. The hallway had been redirected. The psychological toll of this erasure began to show in Harry's later segments. It's a strange feeling, he admits, staring at a flickering candle on a table, to realize that the world can simply move on. You spend your life thinking you're a pivotal character in the play, only to find out you were just a guest star. In one specific season, he reflects on the concept of loyalty. He once defined it as standing by someone no matter the cost. Now, his definition has curdled into something more cynical. Loyalty is often just a fancy word for shared secrets. He muses, and once the secrets are told, the loyalty has nowhere to live. The fashion industry, which had once clamored to dress the couple, began to pull back. The Sussex effect on retail had withered. Luxury brands, sensitive to the shifting winds of public favor, began to align themselves with more stable, less complicated figures. The commercial armor that protected their lifestyle was thinning. A prominent royal biographer suggested that Harry's current state is the result of narrative exhaustion. He had told his story so many times in so many formats, books, docuseries, interviews, that there was nothing left but the bones. He had overshared his way into obscurity. "I miss the rain," Harry says unexpectedly in one scene. It's a simple statement, but it carries the weight of 1,000 miles. He isn't talking about the weather. He's talking about the atmosphere of a home he traded for a son that he now finds blindingly bright and unforgiving. Meghan's presence in this chapter is felt primarily through her absence, while she focused on her own brand launches and lifestyle ventures. Harry's descent into introspection created a widening chasm. They were two people living in the same house but inhabiting different universes, one of ambition and one of mourning. Documentary filmmakers noted that Harry's eyes often drifted to the horizon during interviews, as if he were looking for an exit that didn't exist. The problem with burning bridges, he says softly, is that you eventually realize you're stuck on an island, and islands, no matter how beautiful, are small. The Sussex squad, his most vocal online supporters, found themselves in a state of confusion. How do you defend a man who is no longer attacking? How do you fight for someone who seems to have surrendered? The fanbase began to fracture, with some turning their backs on his perceived weakness. In the UK, a quiet poll suggested that a small percentage of the public was beginning to feel a sense of pre-mourning for the prince. Not for his life, but for the version of him they once loved, the cheeky, brave soldier. That version was now officially declared dead, replaced by this ghost of a man. Harry discusses the role of the spare one last time. Being the spare meant, I was the backup, he explains. But what happens when the primary system is so stable that it doesn't need a backup anymore? You become an obsolete part. You're just ... extra. The scene shifts to a montage of Harry's old military photos. The contrast between the boy in the desert and the man in the mansion is jarring. In the desert, he had a purpose that didn't require a press release. In the mansion, his purpose is his own survival, and it's a much harder war to win. The segment ends with Harry walking toward a window as the sun sets over the Pacific. He doesn't look back at the camera. He doesn't offer a final word of wisdom. He simply stands there, a silhouette against the fading light, waiting for the dark to arrive. The silence from the palace was no longer a PR strategy. It had become a permanent state of being. Inside the firm, Harry was no longer discussed as a family member or a rebel, but as a legacy liability. The spreadsheets of the royal accountants began to reflect a future where the Sussex name was officially decoupled from any royal association. Even in the footnotes of history. In Montecito, the commercial empire began to show visible cracks. Major deals that had been signed with fanfare years ago were quietly reaching their expiration dates without renewal. The content had run dry. You can only sell the story of your departure so many times before the audience realizes you've never actually arrived anywhere else. Harry's private phone calls to the UK became more frequent yet less productive. He would call old friends from his Eden days, men he hadn't spoken to since the wedding. Most of the calls went to voicemail. Those who did answer spoke in polite, guarded tones, as if they were talking to a stranger who knew too much about their past. I found myself scrolling through my own contacts, Harry admits, his voice echoing in a sparsely furnished room. I was looking for someone who knew me before the cameras. I realized that most of those people are now characters in a story I helped write against them. I deleted my own support system. Meghan's focus shifted entirely toward a new, high-end lifestyle brand. In the promotional materials, Harry was nowhere to be seen. It was an aesthetic of pure white linen independence. She was selling a dream of California perfection, while Harry was increasingly becoming a reminder of the messy, complicated reality of their exit. A secret meeting was allegedly brokered in a neutral city, perhaps Lisbon or Toronto. It wasn't a meeting with the king, but with a mid-level envoy. Harry arrived alone, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't ask for money or for his titles back. He asked for a path. The response was a single devastating sentence. The path you walked out on has been built over. The public's fascination turned into a form of cringe fatigue. Every time a new clip of Harry speaking about his trauma surfaced, the comment sections were no longer filled with Team Harry or Team William. They were filled with people asking him to find a hobby. The tragedy of the prince was that he had become boring. Harry began to obsess over the archives. He spent hours looking at old footage of the Queen, searching for a sign or a hidden message in her past broadcasts. He was looking for permission to come home, forgetting that the person who could grant it was gone and the new occupant of the throne had a much longer memory. My father is a man of duty, Harry notes, his expression unreadable. I used to think That was a weakness, a lack of emotion. Now I see it as a survival mechanism. If you don't have a duty to something larger than yourself, you just dissolve. I'm dissolving. The security costs, once a point of fierce public debate, became a private nightmare. Without the steady stream of tell-all income, the lifestyle required to keep a prince safe in America became unsustainable. The visible security detail shrank. The gates of the mansion felt less like a protection and more like a deadline. Documentary crew filming a separate project caught a candid shot of Harry sitting on a beach at dawn. He wasn't meditating or doing yoga. He was just staring at the water, throwing small stones into the surf. He looked like a man waiting for a ship that he knew wasn't coming. Back in London, the Princess of Wales, Catherine, became the undisputed star of the monarchy. Her silence was her strength, a perfect contrast to Harry's constant noise. Every time she appeared in public, the contrast made Harry look more chaotic, more unanchored. He was the storm and she was the lighthouse. Harry speaks about the mirage of the exit. We thought we were escaping the goldfish bowl, he says, leaning back into the shadows. But we just jumped into a larger bowl with hungrier fish. At least in the old bowl, someone was responsible for feeding us. Here you are the food. The 50th scene marks a turning point. The Sussex trademark applications were quietly withdrawn in several territories. The dream of a global multi-platform brand was dead. What remained was a man and a woman who had built their entire identity on a royal status they no longer possessed and a rebel status the public no longer cared for. Harry's health became a topic of tabloid speculation. He looked thinner, his hair grayer, his eyes perpetually rimmed with red. It wasn't the look of a man living his best life in the sun. It was the look of a soldier who had been behind enemy lines for too long and had forgotten the password to get back. In a moment of raw vulnerability, Harry describes a dream he keeps having. He is in the back of a black car driving through London. People are waving, he feels safe. But when he looks down, he realizes he has no skin. He is just a collection of nerves and memories, exposed to the air. The Hollywood elite who had briefly embraced the couple began to distance themselves. Invitations to the most exclusive Oscars after-parties stopped arriving. In a town that smells failure before it even happens, the Sussex had become radioactive. Not because they were bad people, but because they were no longer winners. Harry addresses the great betrayal, not the one he felt from his family, but the one he felt from the narrative itself. The story promised me that the truth would set me free, he whispers. But the truth didn't set me free. It just left me with nothing else to say, and nothing is a very loud sound. The scene shifts to the king's private study. A photograph of Harry and William as children sits on the desk. The king looks at it for a long moment before turning it face down to make room for state papers. It isn't an act of hatred. It's an act of necessity. The crown must go on, even if a piece of it is missing. The segment ends with Harry standing in his garage, surrounded by boxes that were never unpacked from their move. He opens one and finds his old military uniform. He doesn't put it on. He just touches the fabric, closes the box, and turns off the light. The morning sun in California is relentless, but for Harry, it has lost its warmth. He watches Archie and Lily playing on the grass from a distance. They speak with soft American accents, their laughter echoing a culture he didn't grow up in. He realizes with a sharp pang that to them, the king is just a character in a book, and the palace is a place in a movie. They are growing up in a vacuum of their own history. I tried to explain to Archie who his grandfather is, Harry says, his eyes fixed on the floor. He asked if we could FaceTime him. I had to tell him that Grandpa is very busy. How do you explain to a child that their entire extended family is separated by an ocean of pride and a wall of bulletproof glass? In London, the image of the firm has become incredibly lean. The slimmed-down monarchy is no longer a theory. It is a visible reality. The balcony appearances are sparse, featuring only those who have stayed the course. The absence of Harry is no longer a gaping hole. It has become a scar that has finally finished healing over. Harry's second book project begins to stall. The publishers want more bombshells, more names, more drama. But Harry has no more anger left to give. He sits in his study, staring at a blank screen. He realizes that a memoir about peace doesn't sell as well as a memoir about war. He is being asked to set fire to his family again just to pay the mortgage on his sanctuary. He begins taking long anonymous drives along the Pacific Coast Highway. He listens to British radio stations via the internet just to hear the weather. Reports for London. He finds comfort in the talk of scattered showers over the Midlands and grey skies in the southeast. It's a sensory tether to a world that has learned to breathe without him. The tension within the home reaches a quiet, clinical peak. Meghan is moving at the speed of light meetings, brand launches, strategic partnerships. She is a woman of the future. Harry, however, has become a man of the past. He is stuck in a loop of what-ifs and should-haves, while she is busy building a what's next. We are moving in different directions at the same speed, he notes during a late-night reflection. She's building a kingdom where she is the queen. I'm just trying to find a patch of ground where I don't feel like a fugitive. We share a bed, but we no longer share a destination. Rumors of a British base for Harry begin to circulate. It's reported he is looking for a small, secluded property in the Cotswolds, somewhere he can go without asking permission. But the security issues remain. He can't go back as a prince, and he can't survive there as a civilian. He is a man. Without a country, even in his own country. In a moment of rare irony, Harry finds himself watching an old episode of a satirical show that mocks his life. Years ago, this would have sent him into a rage. Now, he just watches with a detached curiosity. They got the suit wrong, he mutters to the empty room. And I'm not that angry. I'm just tired. He reflects on his father's coronation years later. The memory's a blur of gold and heavy velvet. He remembers the coldness of the stone under his feet and the heat of the cameras on his back. He realizes now that he wasn't looking at a king. He was looking at a man who had finally accepted his fate, a fate Harry spent his life running away from. The Sussex brand attempts to pivot into wellness and mental health advocacy. But the public reaction is lukewarm. People are finding it hard to take advice on inner peace from a man who seems to be in a state of perpetual internal conflict. The disconnect between the message and the messenger has become too wide to bridge. Harry reaches out to an old mentor in the military. The conversation is short and awkward. The military world operates on a code of silence and absolute loyalty. By speaking out, Harry broke the one rule that made him one of them. He realizes that the Captain Wales he loved was the identity he traded away for a prince he hates. I miss the hierarchy, he admits surprisingly. In the army, you knew where you stood. You knew who was above you and who was beside you. In this new life, everyone is a peer and everyone is a competitor. It's exhausting to have to prove your worth every single day. He begins to collect antique watches, a hobby that requires focus and stillness. He spends hours cleaning the tiny gears, fascinated by how every small piece must work in perfect unison for the whole thing to function. It is the exact opposite of the life he chose, which is a collection of fragments that no longer fit together. Meghan gives a major interview to a high-end fashion magazine. She speaks about letting go of the weights of the past. It is a clear, subtle signal to the world that she is ready to move on, with or without the baggage of the royal drama. Harry reads the article and realizes he is the weight she is referring to, a scene of profound loneliness. Harry is at a local grocery store in Montecito. He is wearing a mask and a hat, but a woman recognizes him. She doesn't ask for a photo. She just gives him a look of deep, sincere pity. It's the look you give someone who has lost their way. He abandons his cart and leaves the store. The irony of privacy, Harry says, is that once you finally get it, you realize why people are so afraid of it. Privacy is just another word for being alone with your own mistakes, and there is no one to blame when the room is empty. He starts writing letters to his brother William. He doesn't send them. He keeps them in a wooden box by his bed. They aren't letters of apology, nor are they letters of accusation. They are just observations, memories of their mother, jokes they used to share. They are the fragments of a bridge he is building in the dark. The 80th scene ends with a close-up of Harry's face as he watches the news. A small segment shows William and Catherine at a public event. They look happy, stable, and profoundly normal. Harry reaches out and touches the screen, his finger hovering over his brother's face for a second before he turns the television off and sits in the silence. The narrative has shifted from the rebel prince to the ghost of the palace. The host Question is no longer if he will return, but if there is anything left of him to bring back. Asterisk, a cold realization settled over Harry. One evening in early 2026 as a breaking news notification flashed on his phone. It wasn't about him, but about his father's health, which had reportedly taken another sharp decline. For the first time, Harry's reaction wasn't anger at being left out of the official loop. It was a frozen void of silence. He sat at his dark kitchen table, realizing that the man who held the keys to home was now preparing to leave the stage forever. Harry attempted to call a private number he had avoided for years. The call connected, but it wasn't the king's voice on the other end. It was a high-level equerry, polite but impossibly distant. "We will pass your message along, Your Royal Highness," the voice said. The use of the formal title felt like a sharp-edged reminder that behind the protocol, he was no longer a son calling his father, but an outsider filing a request. In London, Buckingham Palace began implementing a transition protocol with surgical precision. In leaked documents, Harry's name was placed under the category of non-working royal overseas. There was no role for him in the upcoming ceremonies, no seat in the front row. He had been erased from the future of the institution, not with violence, but with the quiet finality of administration. "I realized then that I had become a footnote," Harry whispers in his reflective script. "You spend your entire life feeling like you're at the center of the storm, only to wake up one day and realize the storm has moved on, leaving you washed up on a very quiet, very lonely shore." Meghan, meanwhile, began taking decisive steps to solidify her presence on the global political and business stage. She was seen in Washington speaking on women's rights and economic policy. She no longer referred to herself as part of the royal family. She was a purely American entity. Harry was often left in the shadows of her formal events, looking like a relic from a past that was rapidly fading. Harry began making secret visits to a veterans cemetery in California. There, amidst the rows of nameless white headstones, he felt more at home than in his own mansion. In that place, no one cared about TV interviews or memoirs. He was just a man who had once worn a uniform, standing among peers who would never demand anything from him. Archie's 7th birthday was celebrated with luxury, yet it felt hollow. Celebrity friends arrived with expensive gifts, but not a single cousin from England was present. Harry watched Archie blow out the candles and realized his son didn't miss his grandfather, because Archie didn't know what he had lost. It was Harry's greatest success and his deepest failure. Asterisk, freedom has a very specific price. Harry muses, looking at his passport on the desk. The price is your history. I bought my children's future by burning my own past. Sometimes I wonder if they will thank me for it, or if they will hate me for leaving them without any roots. The relationship between Harry and William reached absolute zero. There were no more emotional texts, no more arguments. There was only total absence. In a public speech, William mentioned their mother, Diana, and for the first time, he did not link her memory to Harry. It was as if history had been rewritten to suggest Harry was never there. Harry began writing. Again, not for the public, but in a private journal kept under lock and key. He wrote about the smell of the grass at Highgrove after the rain, the sound of horses' hooves on London pavement, and his brother's laugh before everything became complicated. He wrote to ensure those memories didn't vanish as he aged in California. Their financial investments began to face significant pressure. The astronomical cost of living and the never-ending security bills began to erode their reserves. Harry contemplated selling some of his private assets, including several luxury watches gifted by his father. Selling them felt like selling off the last remaining fragments of his soul. "I used to think the truth would set me free," Harry says in a tight close-up, "but the truth only left me naked. Once you show the world everything, the world turns away to find a newer, fresher spectacle. That is the horror of total transparency." An offer arrived from a prestigious university for Harry to become a visiting fellow on the topic of mental health. Harry turned it down. He realized he no longer wanted to be an expert on anything related to trauma. He simply wanted to be unknowna. Luxury, he realized, was now impossible to obtain. One afternoon, Harry walked along a deserted beach. He saw a British tourist wearing a commemorative T-shirt of the late Queen. The tourist passed Harry without recognizing him. For a split second, Harry felt a surge of joy. He was invisible. But that joy was instantly replaced by a profound Sense of loss. He had finally gotten what he wanted, and it felt like death. Meghan and Harry began to appear less frequently together in public. Speculation about separate lives filled the tabloids. Harry didn't bother to deny it. He no longer cared what people said. His focus had shifted entirely inward, to a place where he was trying to forgive himself for not being able to save his mother, please his father, or understand his brother. "We are all the villains in someone else's story," Harry writes in his journal. "I accept that role now. If I have to be the villain for England so they can feel united again, so be it. I will carry that burden as long as I can sleep at night." Shows Harry sitting on his terrace, watching old YouTube clips of his younger self. He sees the old Harry, the man who laughed easily, who was full of energy, who was loved by his nation. He touches the laptop screen, trying to recapture that energy, but the screen feels cold and flat. Harry received a letter from an old friend in the UK inviting him to a reunion of his military regiment. Harry desperately wanted to go, but he knew his presence would turn the event into a media circus. He tore up the invitation and threw it away. His loyalty was now to his own isolation. In a quiet moment, Harry speaks to his own reflection in the mirror. Who are you without the title? Who are you without the story? The reflection does not answer. Harry realizes he is still searching for that answer, even as he nears half a century of life. Harry standing on the balcony of his sprawling home, staring at the dark sea. The night wind blows through his thinning hair. He doesn't look at the glittering lights of Los Angeles behind him. He stares straight at the horizon toward the east, toward a home he can no longer call his own. The fog over the Pacific feels heavier than usual as the calendar turns. Deeper into 2026, Harry stands in his study holding a burner phone, a device he bought to bypass the layers of staff that now filter his every interaction. He dials a number he hasn't called in 3 years, the direct line to a retired royal gardener who once treated him with more honesty than any courtier. He doesn't want news. He just wants to know if the oaks he planted at Frogmore are still standing. The reply is a whisper of reality. "They're tall, Harry, but the house is dark. It's a museum now in everything but name." This is the catalyst. The realization that his physical footprint in England has been archived while he is still alive sends a tremor through his resolve. He realizes that to the British public, he isn't a man in California. He is a ghost haunting a property they no longer let him enter. He begins to plan a trip, not the Sussex royal tour of old, but a pilgrimage of one. No security teams, no PR briefings, no cameras. He applies for a standard commercial visa on his diplomatic passport, a humiliating necessity that highlights his new status as a visitor to his own birthplace. He packs a single duffel bag, choosing clothes that make him look like any other weary traveler in business class. On the flight over the Atlantic, he sits by the window, watching the clouds. For the first time in his life, he feels the sheer scale of the distance he created. It isn't just miles. It's a cultural and emotional tectonic shift. He realizes that the person landing at Heathrow will not be the prince who left, nor will he be the global icon he tried to become. He is simply a man between two worlds, belonging to neither. Landing at Heathrow is a lesson in anonymity. He walks through the terminal with his hat pulled low, blending into the sea of commuters. The air in London tastes of damp pavement and old stone, a scent that triggers a flood of memories so intense he has to stop and steady himself against a pillar. No one notices him. The most talked about man in the world has successfully become invisible, and the irony is a bitter pill to swallow. He takes a black cab, the driver chatting aimlessly about the football results and the biting wind. Harry listens to the accent, the cadence of home, and feels a lump form in his throat. He directs the driver not to a palace or a hotel, but to a quiet corner of Kensington Gardens. He wants to see the statue of his mother before the city wakes up. Standing before the bronze image of Diana, Harry finds himself waiting for a sign, a feeling, or a sense of peace. But the statue is just metal, cold and indifferent to the morning dew. He realizes that he has spent years using her memory as a shield, only to find that the shield has become a weight. "I'm sorry," he whispers, though he isn't sure who he is apologizing to, her, himself, or the brother he left behind. The news of his presence inevitably leaks. A grainy photo of a man resembling Harry at a London coffee shop hits the tabloids. within hours. The reaction is not the firestorm of 2023, it's a collective shrug. The headlines don't scream traitor or hero, they simply ask, why is he here? This indifference is more painful than the hatred ever was. To be hated is to be significant. To be questioned is to be a nuisance. He makes one attempt to visit his father. He drives to the gates of Clarence's house, but the police at the gate look at him with a mixture of recognition and pity. The king is at Sandringham, sir. And he's not taking unscheduled visitors. The gate doesn't open. There is no dramatic confrontation, just the hum of the electric motor and the sound of distant traffic. The rejection is quiet, clinical, and total. Harry retreats to a small, nondescript rental cottage in the countryside. He spends the afternoon walking through fields he once hunted in. He sees a group of local teenagers and realizes they don't even know who he is. To them, he is just an older man in a barber jacket. The royal brand has no currency here in the heart of the country that gave it its power. He spends a night in a local pub, sitting in a dark corner with a pint of bitter. He listens to the locals talk about the cost of heating and the state of the NHS. Their lives are grounded in a reality he hasn't touched in years. He realizes that his struggles in Montecito are alien to these people. He has become a character. In a soap opera they stopped watching 3 seasons ago, back at the cottage, he receives a text from William. It's short, devoid of warmth, but not hostile. I know you're here, don't make a scene, just go back to your life. It isn't an olive branch, it's a boundary. It's the sound of a brother who has finally finished grieving the loss of a sibling and has moved into the stage of acceptance. Harry stares at the message for hours. He realizes that his return was a search for a ghost. He wanted to find the version of England that loved him, but that version died the moment he sat down with Oprah. He came back looking for a home, but he found a museum where he's the only visitor who still cares about the exhibits. He calls Meghan late at night. The time difference makes her voice sound sharp and awake, full of the energy of her world. She talks about a new partnership and the children's school schedule. She sounds like a woman who is moving forward. Harry, standing in the cold English rain, realizes he is the only one standing still. I think I'm done here, he tells her. There is a long silence on the other end. I know, she says softly. It's the first time they have truly agreed on something in months. They both know that the United Kingdom is no longer a place they can exist in together. He spends his last morning in England visiting his mother's grave at Althorpe. The water of the lake is still. He doesn't bring flowers. He just brings his silence. He finally understands that her story ended here, and his cannot continue if he keeps trying to rewrite hers. He says goodbye not to a princess, but to the idea that he can ever go back. The trip to the airport is faster this time. He doesn't look out the window as the car passes the landmarks of his youth. He realizes that a person can have 2 homes and yet be homeless in both. California is where his future lives, but England is where his soul was formed, and the 2 parts are no longer speaking to each other. As he boards the plane, he sees a magazine at the kiosk with a picture of William, Catherine, and their children. They look like a painting, composed, timeless, and impenetrable. He feels a pang of envy, not for the power, but for the certainty. They know exactly who they are. Harry, settling into his seat, realizes his journey is just beginning. The plane takes off, and as the lights of London fade into the clouds, Harry feels a strange sense of lightness. The royal label is finally peeling off. He is no longer a prince in exile. He is just a man on a flight, heading toward a house that he must finally try to turn into a home. He closes his eyes and, for the first time in years, he doesn't dream of the palace. He dreams of the ocean. The water is vast, terrifying, and deep, but at least it's moving. And for Harry in 2026, moving is the only thing that matters. The plane touches down in Los Angeles, and the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and exhaust, a stark contrast to the damp earth of the English countryside. Harry walks through the private terminal, but the familiar rush of adrenaline he used to feel when returning to freedom is absent. Instead, there is a hollow resonance in his chest. He realized on the flight that he didn't bring back any souvenirs, not even a stone from the river. He brought back something heavier, the finality of a closed door. He arrives at the Montecito mansion to find it buzzing with a different kind of energy. Meghan is in the middle of a high-stakes meeting for her new lifestyle brand, Aurelia. The house is filled with young, ambitious assistants carrying mood boards and samples of organic linens. Harry walks through the foyer, a ghost in his own hallways. No one stops him. He is no longer the royal draw for the business. He is the quiet husband who lives in the north wing. He retreats to his garden, the only place where the ground feels honest. He begins to dig, not with the delicate precision of a gardener, but with the frantic energy of a man trying to bury something deep. He realizes that for years he used his trauma as a foundation for his identity. But foundations are meant to be built upon, not lived inside. He looks at his dirty hands and realizes he has spent more time talking about his past than living his present. A package arrives from the UK, intercepted by his security team. It's a small wooden box with no return address. Inside is a single, tarnished silver whistle, a relic from his childhood at Ludgrove School. There is no note. He knows it's from an old friend, a silent signal that while he is forgotten by the institution, he is remembered by the people. He carries the whistle in his pocket like a talisman, a reminder of a time when life was measured by the length of a break-time game. The Sussex commercial empire undergoes a radical shift. The Harry and Meghan joint venture is officially rebranded. The Sussex name is moved to the background, replaced by Meghan's individual brand. The market data is clear. The public is interested in her ambition, but they are fatigued by his introspection. He signs the legal documents with a steady hand. He isn't losing his power. He is surrendering a burden he never knew how to carry. On stepping back, he tells Meghan over dinner. She looks up from her laptop, her eyes searching his. From what? She asks. From everything, he replies. From the interviews, the advocacy, the fight. I want to be the person who picks up the kids from school. I want to be the man who knows how to fix the fence. It is the most honest conversation they have had in years. The transition to a private citizen is harder than he imagined. Without the structure of a diary managed by others, the days stretch out like an endless desert. He finds himself waking up at 5 a.m., a habit from his army days with nowhere to go. He begins to volunteer at a local animal shelter, cleaning cages and walking dogs. The dogs don't care that he's a prince. They only care that he has a leash and a steady hand. They only care that he has a leash and a steady hand. The media's interest in him begins to wither. Without a new attack on the palace, the paparazzi stop camping outside his gate. A tabloid runs a small, grainy photo of him at a hardware store buying light bulbs. The headline is "The Ordinary Prince," but the tone isn't mocking. It's almost bored. He has finally achieved the invisibility he claimed to want, and he discovers it is the loneliest victory of his life. He starts a new project, a small workshop in the back of the estate. He begins to work with wood, learning the grain and the temper of different timbers. It's a slow, punishing craft. He makes a small stool for Lily, then a birdhouse. The tactile nature of the work anchors him. For the first time, he is creating something that doesn't require a PR strategy to explain its value. In the UK, the Prince of Wales brand reaches a new peak of popularity. William is seen as the steady hand, the future king who survived the storm. Harry watches a clip of his brother at a state banquet. He notices the gray in William's hair and the weight in his eyes. He feels a sudden, sharp pang of sympathy. He realized that while he escaped the prison, his brother is the one who stayed behind to keep the lights on. Harry begins to write again, but this time it's fiction. He creates a story about a boy who can talk to the wind, a boy who travels the world looking for a kingdom that doesn't exist. It is a fairy tale, but it's the most truthful thing he has ever written. He doesn't plan to publish it. He reads it to Archie at bedtime, watching his son's eyes widen with wonder. Archie asks him one night, "Papa, were you really a soldier?" Harry pulls out his old medals, the metal cool against his palm. He tells his son about the desert, the brotherhood, and the heat. He doesn't mention the titles or the palaces. He realizes that to his children, his most important rank is veteran and his most important title is dad. A quiet dinner is held for his 42nd birthday. There are no cameras, no celebrities, just a few local friends and his family. The conversation is about the local school board and the best places to surf. He realizes that he is no longer the prince in this room. He is just Harry. It is a small, fragile piece, but it is his. He receives an invitation to a global summit on mental health. He looks at the invitation for a long time. It's an opportunity to step back into the spotlight to be the expert again. He thinks about the quiet of his workshop and the weight of the silver whistle in his pocket. He types a polite no and hits send. The relief he feels is instantaneous. Meghan's brand, Aurelia, launches to massive success. She is the cover of Forbes, the face of a new era of female entrepreneurship. Harry stands at the launch party, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching her shine. He is genuinely proud of her. He realizes that she was always built for this world, while he was only ever a visitor passing through. He takes Archie to a local beach to watch the sunset. They sit on the sand, the tide licking at their feet. Archie asks why the sun goes away. It doesn't go away, Harry explains. It just goes to light up another part of the world. It's always there, even when you can't see it. He realizes he is talking about himself. The Sussex name officially disappears from his social media and business profiles. He is now simply Harry Mountbatten Windsor. The change causes a minor stir in the press for 24 hours, then it is forgotten. He looks at his new business card, which just has his name and his phone number. It is the most beautiful thing he has ever owned. He spends an afternoon looking through old photos of his mother. He finds one he hasn't seen in years. Diana sitting in a field of sunflowers, laughing at something off camera. She looks happy, untethered, and free. He realizes that this is the version of her he wants to honor, not the victim, but the woman who knew how to find joy in the middle of a storm. The final segment of his internal monologue shifts. I spent 40 years trying to be what I was born to be, and 5 years trying to be what I thought I should be. Now I'm just trying to be who I am. It's a simple conclusion, but it took a lifetime of wreckage to reach it. He stands on his balcony as the night falls. He can hear the distant sound of the Pacific. He isn't looking at the horizon for a ship anymore. He is looking at the lights of his own house where his children are sleeping and his wife is working. He turns around, walks inside, and closes the door. The prince is gone. The man has arrived. The stillness of the Montecito mornings begins to feel less like an isolation and more like a chosen rhythm. Harry starts his days not with a briefing from a PR team, but with the quiet hum of his workshop. He is working on a larger project now, a heavy oak dining table. It is symbolic, a piece of furniture designed to bring people together, built from a wood that takes centuries to grow and minutes to cut down. Every stroke of the sandpaper is an exercise in patience, a virtue he once traded for the instant gratification of a headline. He becomes a familiar, if unremarkable, sight at the local farmer's market. He wears no disguises now, no hats pulled low, no sunglasses in the shade. The locals have grown accustomed to him. He is the man who meticulously picks out the best tomatoes and speaks quietly to the vendors about the soil quality. One morning, an elderly woman struggles with her bags. Harry reaches out and carries them to her car. She thanks him, calling him young man, unaware that she is being assisted by the son of a king. He drives home with a smile that reaches his eyes for the first time in years. In London, the narrative has shifted into a period of the great forgetting. The press, once obsessed with every sigh he exhaled, has found new targets. The royal family has moved into a more streamlined, professional era, focusing on climate technology and social cohesion. Harry is no longer the black sheep. He is simply the brother who moved away. This lack of friction allows the wounds to finally begin to scar over. No news is, for the first time in his life, very good news. A letter arrives, hand-delivered to the gate by a courier from the British consulate. It is an invitation to a private, non-state event, a memorial service for an old family friend. Ground. Harry knows this is a test, a chance to see if he can exist in the same space as his family without the world collapsing. He discusses it with Meghan over coffee. She looks at him and says, "You don't need my permission to go home, Harry. But you do need to decide who you're going as." He flies to Amsterdam under his birth name, Harry Mountbatten Windsor. There are no cameras waiting at the airport. He checks into a modest hotel and spends the evening walking the canals. He feels like a ghost, but a peaceful one. But the weight he felt for so long wasn't just the British press, it was the expectation he carried for himself. In this foreign city, he is just another tourist in a wool coat, and the anonymity is intoxicating. The chapel is small, filled with the scent of lily and old wax. Harry arrives early and takes a seat in the back row. 10 minutes later, a side door opens. Prince William enters, accompanied by a single security officer. The air in the room seems to thin. William doesn't see him at first. He walks to the front, his shoulders squared, the weight of the future visible in the way he carries his head. Harry watches his brother and feels no anger, only a profound sense of recognition for the burden they both share. During the service, their eyes meet. Across the pews. It isn't a movie moment, no dramatic music, no tears. It is a sharp, brief nod of acknowledgement between two men who have survived a war. It is the most significant conversation they have had in 5 years. In that nod, there is an apology. Neither of them moves to bridge the physical gap, but the emotional chasm feels slightly less infinite. After the service, they find themselves alone in the stone-paved courtyard. The rain is beginning to fall, a soft. His voice is raspy, tired, but steady. "I'm working with wood now," Harry replies, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's harder than it looks." William chuckles, a dry, short sound. "Everything is harder than it looks." They stand in the rain for 3 minutes, talking about nothing and everything before the world pulls them back in opposite directions. The encounter isn't leaked to the press. Harry returns to California feeling lighter. He realizes that reconciliation isn't a grand event. It's a series of quiet, unremarkable moments where the ego is set aside. Back in Montecito, Harry kneels down in the dirt and helps him. "You know, Archie," he says, "the best houses aren't the ones with the most rooms. They're the ones where the people inside feel safe." Archie looks at him with the fierce clarity of a child and says, "I feel safe, Papa." Harry closes his eyes for a second, the words echoing in his mind like a blessing. The oak table is finally finished. They sit around the table he built with his own hands, eating food he bought at the market. There is no talk of the firm or the brand. They talk about the drought, the local school, and the best hiking trails. Harry listens more than he speaks. He realizes that for 40 years, he was a person people talked about. Now, he's a person people talk to. Meghan notices the change in him. The tension in his jaw has vanished. The restless tapping of his fingers has stopped. She watches him from the doorway of the workshop and sees a man who has finally found his own gravity. She realizes that her ambition and his peace are no longer at odds. They are the two poles of their new life. She joins him at the table, and for the first time, they aren't a power couple, they are just a family. Harry begins to mentor a group of local veterans in a small woodworking program he starts in a rented garage. He doesn't use his title. He is just Harry, the guy who knows a bit about the army and a bit about Oak. He finds that his story, the real one about loss and rebuilding, has more power when it isn't sold as a commodity. He is helping men find their hands again, and in doing so, he is finishing the work of finding his own. A documentary crew reaches out for a 5 years later follow-up. They offer millions for a sit-down interview. Harry doesn't even read the full proposal. He tells his assistant to decline, but to send them the contact info for a charity that supports veteran mental health. He realizes that his silence is now his most valuable asset. It isn't a weapon anymore. It's a sanctuary. He takes a solo hike into the Santa Ynez Mountains. From the peak, he can see the Pacific on one side and the valley on the other. He stands on the ridge, the wind whipping his jacket. He thinks about the boy who walked behind a coffin in 1997. The soldier in helmet and the prince in the suit. They are all still part of him, but they no longer define him. He is the man on the mountain, and for the first time, the view is enough. He reflects on the concept of despair. He realizes that being the spare was never a curse. It was an invitation to go where the primary could not. It gave him the freedom to fail, to leave, and to eventually find a truth that wasn't dictated by a crown. He wasn't the backup. He was the explorer. He breathes in the thin mountain air and feels a deep sense of gratitude for the path that led him here. He finds an old photo of his father in a book, a young Prince Charles standing in a field, looking pensive. Harry sees the resemblance now, not just in the nose or the ears, but in the search for purpose. He realizes his father was always just a man doing his best within a system that didn't allow for much else. Replaced by a quiet, distant empathy, night falls over in Montecito. Harry sits on the porch watching the fireflies. He pulls the silver whistle from his pocket and looks at it. He doesn't blow it. He doesn't need to call anyone anymore. He puts it back in his pocket and goes inside. The house is warm, the children are asleep, and the air is still. There are scratches on the surface, no signs of use, signs of life. A spilled glass of juice, a mark from a toy car. It isn't a museum piece, it's a piece of a home. Harry's. He is no longer waiting for the next chapter. He is living the one he's in. The morning air in Montecito carries a different weight as the summer of 2026 begins. Harry stands at the edge of his property, watching a crew of local craftsmen install a modest wooden sign at the entrance of his new community workshop. It simply reads The Grain. No crests, no mottos, no mention of royalty. He realizes that for the first time in his life, he's a small business owner. The transition from being a global symbol to a local neighbor is nearly complete, and the quietness of it is his greatest achievement. Archie's 7th birthday approaches, and with it comes a surprising request. The boy, now deeply curious about the world beyond the gates, asks to see the big clock his father once mentioned. Harry realizes that he cannot keep his children in a Californian vacuum forever. Their heritage is a map of 2 worlds, and to deny them one is to leave them half-blind. He and Meghan sit in the garden discussing a potential trip to London, not as a royal visit, but as a father showing his son his birthplace. The logistics are planned with the precision of a military operation, yet with none of the fanfare. They book a small private rental in the English countryside, far from the prying eyes of the London tabloids. Harry finds himself feeling a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. He isn't returning as a rebel prince seeking an apology. He is returning as a guide. He wants Archie to see the oaks, the rain, and the history without the weight of the crown crushing the experienced daw as they touch down on British soil. The familiar grey sky greets them like an old friend. Harry takes Archie to a quiet tucked-away park in Windsor. They walk through the tall grass, and Harry points out the castle in the distance. "My family lives there," he says simply. Archie looks at the stone towers and then back at his father. "Do they have a workshop like yours, Papa?" Harry laughs, a genuine light sound. "No, Archie. They have a different kind of work." In a move that shocks the royal commentators who still track their every move, Harry does not reach out to the press. There are no leaked photos of the visit. The family remains ghosts in the landscape. This silence is the ultimate power move. By not engaging with the media machine, Harry has effectively broken its hold over him. He is a tourist in his own life, and for the first time, he feels completely in control of the narrative by having no narrative at all. A private meeting is arranged at a neutral location, a quiet cottage on the Sandringham estate. It is just Harry, William, and their father. The room is thick with the scent of wood smoke and history. There are no lawyers, no assistants, no wives. For 3 hours, they sit together as men. They don't talk about the book, the interviews, or the past. They talk about the children. They talk about the burden of leadership and the price of peace. Harry looks at his father, the king, and sees a man who is profoundly tired but resolved. He sees his brother, the heir, and sees a man who has accepted his destiny. Harry realizes he is the only one in the room who is truly free. He feels a surge of love for them, a love that doesn't require them to be perfect or for him to be right. The knot in his chest that has been tight since 1997 finally begins to unravel. He brings Archie to meet his grandfather. The meeting is brief and shielded from the world. The king gives the boy a small antique silver compass that once belonged to King George. "So you always know which way is home," the king whispers. Harry watches his son shake his grandfather's hand and realizes that the bridge has been rebuilt, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet acknowledgement of blood. The return to California feels different this time. The Sussex name is mentioned in a major news segment regarding their philanthropic work, but the tone has shifted. The media has moved from the feud to the legacy. Harry's invited to give a speech at a local university commencement. He accepts. He doesn't talk about his trauma or the palace. He talks about the importance of being the spare in your own life, the importance of being willing to change your path when the one you're on leads nowhere. We are told that our lives are defined by where we come from, Harry tells the graduates, standing at the podium in a simple suit. But the truth is our lives are defined by what we choose to build once we get there. It's okay to walk away from a story that no longer fits you. It's okay to start again. The speech goes viral not for the gossip but for the wisdom. People start to see Harry not as a disgruntled royal but as a man who successfully navigated a midlife rebirth. Meghan's brand continues to flourish, but she too has found a new equilibrium. She spends more time in the workshop with Harry, learning to appreciate the slow pace of manual labor. As the sun sets over the Pacific, Harry looks around and realizes that he has finally built the team he always wanted. It's small, it's private, and it's real. He receives a letter from a veteran who attended his woodworking class. The man writes about how the act of shaping wood helped him process his own PTSD. Harry reads the letter and cries. It is the first time he has felt his mother's legacy truly alive in his own hands. She didn't want him to be a symbol. She wanted him to be a healer. He realizes he has finally found his service. In London, a small subtle change is made to the official royal website. Harry's profile is updated not with his military exploits or his royal duties, but with a simple line about his work in community craft and veteran support. It is a silent olive branch from the palace, an acknowledgement of his new life. Harry sees it and smiles. He doesn't need the titles back. He tells her about the fields in England and the sun in California. Truly global citizens, untethered by the constraints of an ancient class system. They are free to be whoever they want to be, and that is the greatest gift he could ever give them. Harry starts a podcast, but it's not about himself. It's called The Craft, and he interviews people who make things with their hands: potters, blacksmiths, farmers. He finds he's a natural interviewer because he is genuinely interested in the process of creation. The show becomes a surprise hit, praised for its calm and grounded energy. The world finally hears Harry's voice without the distortion of the royal megaphone. He reflects on the concept of the palace one last time. He realizes that a palace isn't a building. It's a state of mind where you are protected from the truth. He has traded his stone palace for a wooden workshop, and in doing so he has found the world. He is no longer looking for an exit. He is exactly where he needs to be. A major anniversary of his mother's passing arrives. Instead of a public statement or a televised special, Harry spends the day at a local beach with his family. They build a sandcastle together. When the tide comes in and washes it away, Archie looks disappointed. It's okay, Harry says, pulling his son close. The ocean keeps the memory. We just get to build something new tomorrow. The 180th segment concludes with Harry in his workshop late at night. The air is cool and smells of cedar. He is working on a small, intricate jewelry box. For Meghan, he isn't rushing. He is enjoying the resistance of the wood against the blade. He realizes that for 40 years he was a man in a hurry. Now he has all the time in the world. He looks at a photo of himself as a young soldier, pinned to the wall. He salutes it, a small private gesture of respect for the boy who survived. Then he turns off the light, locks the door, and walks toward the house where the lights are still on. Waiting for him, the shadow of the prince has finally been overtaken by the light of the man. The 2026 version of Harry is not a rebel, not a victim, and not a royal. He is simply finally Harry. Asterisk, the 2026 autumn air in California feels crisp, yet Harry's mind is pulled toward the damp, historic chill of Europe. An unexpected invitation arrives, not via a royal courier, but through a personal email from the office of the Invictus Games. A new initiative is being launched, a joint veteran rehabilitation center based in Germany, a project that requires a bridge between his American influence and his European roots. He realizes that while he has found peace in the workshop, his true vocation still lies in the service of those who sacrifice their bodies for a flag. He sits with Meghan in the quiet of their library, the shelves now filled with books on craftsmanship and philosophy rather than law and PR. They discuss the possibility of a third way, a life that isn't lived in the shadow of the palace or the glare of Hollywood, but in the neutral, productive space of international service. He proposes the idea of a permanent European base in a place like Portugal or the Netherlands, a place where the children can grow up hearing multiple languages, feeling the weight of history without the suffocation of the British class system. The transition begins quietly. Harry begins to sell off his remaining interests in the high-stakes media ventures that defined his first few years in America. He is liquidating his past to fund a future of quiet utility. He finds that as his bank balance becomes less a matter of public record, his sense of agency grows. He is no longer an asset to be managed. He is a man with a mission. A significant milestone arrives. William reaches out with a proposal for a joint mental health project under the banner of the Diana legacy. It is the first time their names will appear together on a letterhead since the split. Harry agrees, but with one condition: the project must be managed by a neutral board of directors. He is willing to work with his brother, but he is no longer willing to be absorbed back into the firm. The agreement marks the beginning of a professional partnership built on mutual distance and shared respect. Harry travels to Berlin for the groundbreaking ceremony of the rehabilitation center. The German press is respectful, focusing on his work rather than his family. He feels a surge of professional pride. Standing among the veterans, he isn't Prince Harry or the Duke of Sussex. Dia Adala Harry sang Pendurium Memahami. Ardadari Kan Kiran Dempemben Ginong Kambali. In his speech, he speaks about the architecture of the soul, comparing the healing process to the way wood must be seasoned before it can be used for something strong. During the trip, he makes a detour to a small village in the Black Forest to meet a master woodworker. They spend 3 days together in silence, working with ancient oaks. It has its own time. Harry realizes this has been the lesson of his entire life. He had tried to rush his healing, his fame, and his family's forgiveness. Now he is finally content to wait.